Okay, you are listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHMWPPM. Tonight on the program, we'll be joined by Reverend Mark Tyler to discuss the repair work underway at Mother Bethel AME Church. Lance Haver will provide an update on water rate hikes, and we'll have the second part of our interview with Council Member Kendra Brooks. And I'd like to bring in Denise Clay Murray.
Hi, how are you?
Good, Denise. How are you tonight?
I'm good, but apparently my camera isn't working.
Well, that's okay. We know you're here, so we'll have a little time to fix that, because we'll lead off with our interview with Reverend Mark Tyler that you conducted yesterday.
Yes, I'm live at Mother Bethel AME Church right now. They're getting ready to rededicate the window that was broken. And this church kind of has like a special place in my heart because Chris and I were married here. And we've always had this will always have a special place in our heart. So I wanted to definitely be here when they rededicated the window. So we reached out.
So here's your interview with Reverend Mark Tyler.
So I'm on with the Reverend Mark Kelly Tyler of Mother Bethel AME Church.
So we're having a technical issue there. Hopefully that gets resolved pretty soon. Denise, do we still have you? All right.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. So you're there right now.
Yes, I am.
What time does that ceremony begin?
Well, it's actually started now. It started at 6, and it's part of the church's, like the AME denomination is having an annual conference here in the city. And they decided that since Mother Bethel is kind of the mothership church of the AME denomination, that now would be the best time to rededicate the window. So that's what's going on tonight.
Okay, and I think we have that video now. Okay, let's run the interview.
She is the pastor there. And in addition to being a longtime activist and the pastor of the Mother Church of the AME denomination, he is also the former co-host of a little show I used to do called Mark and Denise in the Mornings. And he's the person that married Chris and I. So I definitely wanted to have him on to talk about the rededication of the stained glass window at Mother Bethel AME Church, which is going on as we speak. So tell me a little bit about tell us a little bit about Mother Bethel AME Church and why it's important to the AME denomination.
Yeah, sure, Denise. Thank you. First of all, glad to be here, and still happy that you and Chris decided to do your wedding at Mother Bethel. I think, if I'm not mistaken, if memory serves me correctly, yours was the first event that we did after the pandemic.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think that before we had any funerals or anything else, it was really as good as I can remember. The first thing coming back into the sanctuary to do was actually a wedding. So we hadn't even had services back in the building yet. And so, so your nuptials blessed and reopened our sanctuary. How do you like that?
Well, no pressure.
Of course not. So, listen, so Mother Bethel is, again, I think a part of the reason you all selected it, knowing the appreciation that the both of you have for history, is a historic treasure, not just for the AME Church, not just for Philadelphia, but for the country and for the world. There are older Black churches. We often get the distinction as being the oldest Black church in America, which is not necessarily true. There are a couple of churches that have us by about 10 years. But those churches were set up largely with the help of whites, a Baptist church in one case, and a different denomination in another. In the case of Mother Bethel, what makes it unique is it is the first independent effort of Black people for Black people to start and advance their own faith tradition. And according to some, it's the first new denomination in American Christendom. So if you think about it, all these other churches that came over, Quakers, Baptists, everyone else, Presbyterians, they came over as an extension of something that was sent to America from Europe. The African Methodist Episcopal Church was a unique innovation and was created here on this soil, uniquely American, and also tied back into the old world in certain kind of ways as well. So as a result, we have tremendous, tremendous history in this place. Richard Allen, our founder, is buried here. His wife, Sarah, is buried here. She was was very recognized as a freedom fighter on the Underground Railroad. The founder of Mother Emanuel in Charleston, Bishop Morris Brown, is also buried here because he was the pastor of Denmark Vesey in Charleston in 1822 with the failed slave revolt that was planned inside Mother Emanuel. As a result, that church was destroyed, and their pastor, Morris Brown, came to Philadelphia, where he became Richard Allen's understudy. So, I mean, look, that's just a snippet. We got tons of history as well.
Now, talk a little bit about the event that's going on tonight with the window rededication. What happened to this window, and how long did it take to fix it, to replace it?
Sure. Well, many people in the Philadelphia area will remember that in February that there was a person who had some mental health issues, apparently, who went around vandalizing not only our church, but another church as well, where St. John Newman is buried, a Catholic church on the other end of kind of where we are, kind of Northern Liberties, if you will, and then a bunch of businesses along the route. But he singled out our windows. We think he's just attracted to windows, and ours are beautiful stained glass windows. And I'll tell you, Denise, what was interesting is the bank of lights on the inside of the sanctuary were on where he broke the windows out. I kind of think it was like a moth to a fire, because the other side of the building was dark. And those, if you're like a person that your thing is breaking out stained glass windows, it must have been like candy to a baby walking down the street, thinking like, this is what I've been looking for all night long. So I want to acknowledge and what happened, and also say that we are in deep prayer that this person gets the help that he needs. If in fact it's proven that he was the person and that he has some mental health issues, we want him to be made whole as well. It doesn't do us any service having this person just locked up to come out and do the same things. Now, that said, he did some very, very serious damage to our building. The stained glass windows that he attacked were the ones that were on the street level. Fortunately, they were not the ones upstairs that have they're very ornate with the designs and all of the different kind of stories that are told in the windows. But these windows were put in the building in 1889. So if you imagine, they've been undisturbed, unmolested since that period of time. And he actually destroyed windows in 4 separate sets of windows. So we had to have those windows taken out. And I mean, they were mangled in some cases. And Denise, if you know how stained glass, these were surrounded, I'm imagining that was lead, the way that they were sealed in there from back in 1889. And so this is not something that you can just go down to Home Depot or Lowe's and pick up some stained glass window and just drop in. We put bids out to different artists, and we found an amazing artist, Mr. Owusu, who is from Nigeria. And so, he gave us, his plan, said he could do it in time enough for our annual conference to have them back installed. And sure enough, he did it. And honestly, I can't tell which windows were damaged unless I go back and look at the photograph of what was taken during the vandalized portion.
So he had to recreate the original window?
Oh, absolutely. So he had to basically start from scratch. Now, I mean, look, he is a stained glass craftsman. So this is what he does. And so this is, I guess, to a layperson like myself, I'm thinking, I don't know how in the world you're going to make something that's new look like something that old and not make it stand out. As I talk to him, this will be a challenge for people who come in tomorrow to see them. he said initially the only color he struggled with was green. So there are multiple colors in the set of windows, small window panes. So I want to see if I can find out if he resolved his issue with green or not. But I mean, like I said, I'm very pleased with the outcome. They just blend in perfectly, and to have that the wood covering taken off and have the windows breathing again is just incredible.
Now, I'm pretty sure this wasn't an inexpensive undertaking. Did the church have to do like a special fundraiser to get the window repaired, or did your insurance cover that?
Well, so we did not file an insurance claim, and that's only because of the goodness of the community. So I will say this. So let me give you your viewers something, kind of the inside story that no one else knew during the week of this. You knew because we spoke before we did an interview. Leslie, my wife, and I had just landed in Johannesburg, South Africa, the day before this happened. So we wake up the next morning and we're kind of going about our Johannesburg day, and we get a call midway through that first day from the church. It's now morning in Philadelphia. And they're like, "Oh my God, you won't believe what happened." I'm like, "You got to be kidding." So how do we find out? And so our building crew is here, and they're like, "Well, we walked up and a news crew is here from ABC." I'm like, "A news crew? Who called the news?" They're like, "We don't know. We just heard like they're here." And so the news is trying to interview our staff. So, Denise, you as a journalist, you already know all about that, right?
Mhm.
So I have to go into, kind of like pastor mode from afar and do this interview. Luckily, my wife, Leslie, is, long-term former journalist. And so she kind of goes into that mode. And we do the first interview thinking, all right, this should be it. The police had already told me that they don't think it's what people think. It's not nefarious. It's probably a random guy. That was their strong suspicion from the beginning. I supported it because of the way that it kind of looked. Well, Denise, the one story turns into, I don't know, I think I did 20 interviews at least during those next 3 days while we are in South Africa, trying to be in South Africa for an AME conference and at least see Soweto in parts of the country. And so while I'm trying to sleep, I've got to be up for Philadelphia interviews, right? It was a crazy, crazy week that ironically resolved itself on our flight back. At the end of the week, they captured the guy. So it's kind of, our entire trip was like a bookend. Now, as a result of all that news coverage, the community quickly rallied around us, and the Preservation Alliance and Partners for Sacred Places, two groups that do a lot of work around preserving historical assets like ours. We worked with them before, received grants from them before, we've hosted them before, and they reached out to us, and their directors both said, "Listen, if you'll let us, we want to put out an appeal on your behalf. And if whatever comes in, 100% comes back to you. We know them, we trust them." I'm like, guys, I appreciate it. They did. And I mean, the money just came pouring in. I cannot even begin to tell you the ways in which people began to be a blessing to the church to take care of the windows. What's important to know are two things. One is, yes, it absolutely covered the cost of the windows and a brand new security system, because our security system, which was only, I'd say, 7 or 8 years old, was now inadequate, and it could have picked up on this if it had been better. So we redid the entire security system as well as a result of it. But this also saved us from going to the insurance company. Now, Denise, I would love for you to do a story on this piece that I'm about to say. Right now, insurance companies are dropping churches left and right around the country. They've just decided that churches are too much of a liability. Even church insurance companies that have the word church in it, right? They only go after churches, are dropping churches. So what we didn't want to do was to actually write a claim for it, because we didn't want it to, number one, take our premium up at best, or at worst, lose our policy. So the fact that the community came together and supported us meant that we were able to preserve that policy as it is, and not go to our insurance company and not write a claim. And I'm grateful. Because again, I really don't know what would have happened if we had to file a claim.
Wow, that's fascinating that churches, you would think that if any building could get insurance, it would be a church. And
You would
people are
think.
dropping churches in terms of insuring them. You're right. I'm going to have to look into that because that's nuts.
Yeah. Listen, there was a story in Texas where an entire United Methodist Church annual conference, I think like 20 plus churches lost their policies together. They would bundle them together, and the carrier just dropped them all. And often they don't even give you an excuse or a reason.
They just drop you.
They just drop you.
Wow. But you're right. We're going to have to look into that. But I guess my last question for you is, if folks want to come by tonight and see the rededication, how can they do that?
Well, listen, we're so excited because we're the host of the 208th session of the Philadelphia Annual Conference, which has been meeting, as it sounds, every year since 1816. The first was held at Mother Bethel with Richard Allen. It travels now. So we haven't hosted here at the church since 2012. And we've hosted some other meetings elsewhere. So we're excited about all the AMEs coming back. Since our bishop is here, Bishop Julius McAllister Sr., we had a welcome reception for him. And listen, I've been so busy, I didn't even realize the windows were in, Denise, until last week. I just was talking to our building facilities manager. And I said, so when are the windows going in? She said, oh, Reverend, those are in. I said, wait, they're in? She said, like, in. I said, we got to celebrate. Bishop is going to be here. We need him to pray and rededicate these windows. And let's just invite the community, the hundreds of people who gave and who sent text messages and letters and cards. Let's just invite them out and watch as we rededicate these windows. So from 6 to 8 p.m. On today, people are gathering at Mother Bethel in our fellowship hall and in the Richard Allen Museum on the lower level just to meet and to mingle. And at 7 o'clock, we're going to pause those festivities to come upstairs to the windows. There we'll watch Bishop McAllister lay hands on the windows and pray a prayer of rededication and protection for this building. So we're looking forward to it.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate it. I know you're really, really busy with the conference, so I really appreciate you giving us some of your time.
Not a problem. I'm surprised that nobody knocked on my door in these few minutes. See, the Lord must have wanted us to have this conversation. Come on out and celebrate with us. Thanks, Denise.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
You too.
All right. We would like to thank the Reverend for being with us. And that event is going on right now. So if you're interested in going, you can and stop by and see it. And Denise, I believe the bishop is there now as we speak.
Yes, the bishop is here to bless the windows. So I'm going to take off. But at some point, I would like to discuss with you and have someone come on to talk about the fact that churches are having trouble getting insurance. Because you would think that, that wouldn't be the case. But then again, you also wouldn't think that folks would come into churches and start shooting them up.
Right. So, all right. Well, Denise, we'll let you go and take care of that.
Okay.
And now what we're going to do is play the rest of our interview from last week with Councilmember Kendra Brooks. Councilmember Kendra Brooks, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Larry and Denise.
So the first thing we'd like to talk about, tell us about your trip abroad. What was the impetus for going over there, and what kind of things did you learn about?
Oh, great. So it was an amazing experience, definitely life-changing. I was invited by a group called Power Switch Action. I believe they're out of Chicago, to join a delegation of community groups and city council members from Councilmember Gautier and myself from Philadelphia, 2 council members from Nashville, Tennessee, someone from California, 2 different places in California, and a contingent from the mayor's office in Chicago. So that's the group that we went, and we just went to learn more about what's social housing, to actually meet with folks who have created social housing in both Vienna and Berlin, and kind of get the understanding the government's role in creating social housing in both regions, and just do a comparison between what we see here in the States and in Europe.
And what is social housing specifically?
So social housing is government subsidized housing for all people. So, when we think of public housing is what we call it here, it's just for low income people. But in the European countries that we studied, the majority of their folks are renters. So social housing is a construct where, housing is just affordable for everyone. So in some of the housing developments that we went to visit, we had government ranking officials living in the same complex with, people on fixed income, senior citizens, and it was a shared community experience. And yeah, it was very interesting. It and Vienna was like utopian, which was a little
Mhm.
scary. I had a deja vu moment. I was telling Kathleen because I grew up in Rochdale Village. When I was younger, we lived in Mitchell Liam housing development, which was a co-op. And it brought me back to those days when I was a child in New York, living in the co-op model here in United States.
So how are they able to do that in Vienna?
Well, the government subsidized the cost of the land. So the one in Vienna was built on an old airstrip that was government owned. The government was allowed to subsidize the land for development, and also subsidize the money with low to no interest loans to folks that were developing on this particular land. And with the co-op model, people pay equally into this housing that they are a part of, and it's transferable. So if you decide to move to a bigger flat, as they call it, you have the ability to take some of the money that you invested into it to another flat somewhere else.
Hmm. So is this the kind of thing where there's a program like this? It would seem to me, and based on what I've read, poverty is brought under control a little bit more. There's certainly less homelessness because there are these facilities. And then that frees up funding for other things. Am I wrong on that?
No, absolutely. What we learned is that European governments put their money where their mouth is. So if
Mhm.
housing is a human right, they've created the circumstance where housing is a human right. And people are afforded safe, stable housing at every level. And it's a part of their public infrastructure, just like roads, water, and electricity. And it's kind of a completely different, thought process than how we think about housing here in the States.
And that's one of the really interesting points about this. And not to get too far into it, but why do we have a different outlook here in the United States that is clearly not designed for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, this country was built on a us versus them. So
Hmm.
I think let's start there. But I think the significant is that investing in housing is a part of their social construct and not stigmatizing people for being poor. But that's what we do here, in
Hmm.
the States. And I think, we come from very segregated society, but there is less segregation because, everyone lives together, whether you're wealthy or well off, is like community. And you can feel it when you're in these spaces, and I keep, when I talk about this, I link this to public transportation because public transportation is the same. It was accessible, clean, readily available, and it was the way of living on one of these housing developments that we visited called the Sea Sunk. You couldn't drive within the initial housing construct. Parking was along the outside, and public transportation was readily available, and everyone seemed to be using public transportation. It wasn't a very car friendly society. Um, and I think like the separation between, the have and the have nots isn't as noticeable, in these communities that I saw. And I think that was is still very mind-blowing to me.
Mhm.
Because some folks worked at the shops and lived in these same apartment buildings, and they were very nice. One of the sites we went to visit, they had 36 units, a rooftop entertainment space, a garden, yoga room, sauna, and a library as part of their complex. And there are multiple all over, and they're owned by various entities. Some of them are part of uh, what is it? Limited. They're part of a community that came together to build the housing. Some of them may be owned by businesses like a bank or insurance company that created this construct for, the people that work within their companies. So it was like a very different way to think about housing. And I think it reminded me um, that we can do more and we can do better. In America, housing has become a commodity. And here we see homes are not just part of investment portfolios. And I think that it reminded me that we need to push back against, the corporate housing market. And what we saw was in Germany, they hit financial hardships in Berlin and they sold off a lot of their public housing. And as a result of, we saw far more homelessness when we were in Berlin. And currently, the city is trying to reinvest in social housing because of this issue that happened when they went through economic hardships. That sounds more like where we are in Philadelphia, but it really reminded me that social housing, housing for all, housing is a human right, is possible. And I think if we think about how we can pull together government entities to make this happen, it would cut back on homelessness, um, healthcare, so many things that are associated when people fall on hard times and homelessness participates. So I think it's yeah, we're going to continue to think through ways to make this possible, in the city and like follow models like in Chicago. They already plan on moving forward on it. So I'm looking forward to connecting and watching what happens with our counterparts in Chicago towards social housing. And hopefully we'll be able to move to something similar like that in Philadelphia.
So did anything you saw overseas influence the plan for Philly families? Maybe a different approach to certain things or different ideas that could be incorporated into, the long-term strategy that you're advocating?
Well, one of the things, the plan for Philly families is right on point with what I experienced in Vienna and Berlin, whether it's accessible, affordable transportation for all, whether it's quality housing for everyone, when neighborhoods are walkable and safe with green spaces for young people, access to supermarkets and food sources in every neighborhood. Those are the things that a plan for Philly families is designed on. I think what I saw in Europe is like the pie in the sky. And if we could get close to there, I would be very excited.
Mhm. Okay. So shifting gears a little bit, there has been a lot of controversy regarding school board appointments and confirmations. We've seen a lot of this. What was your position on the appointment of Joyce Wilkerson?
Well, you know, I did not support Joyce Wilkerson for the school board. You know, I've always fought for or against the privatization of schools, and I never believed in opening more charter schools would solve the problems of our public school system. And the fact that I led a fight around public education to keep a school from becoming a public charter. So just like the thought or the notion that was going around that this one vote was me not standing up for public schools and against charter schools. I had to push back against that 100%. It's more about a vision for a democratic school board that's responsive to community needs. So, I just want us to create a more democratic school board, a school board that will work with communities and with elected leaders to meet the school's needs. That's my stance. You know, I've been in this work for a long time. This was my pathway into politics. You know, I feel like we need to create some real changes. We have a new mayor, we have a new city council. If we're going to get a new school board, let's get a new school board, and then start from scratch and create, you know, the school board, or the create the schools that we all want and fight and would, you know, and fighting for. I think that my colleagues on council, you know, many of have children currently in public schools, took a stand saying, you know, this is the construct of a school board that we would like, and I don't know what's happening next.
Mm-hmm. Does the mayor's unilateral appointment of Wilkerson affect the relationship between council and the mayor's office?
Oh, I can't speak for council and all as a whole. We are all independently elected officials and have varying relationships with the mayor, so I can't speak on, you know, the relationship that other people have with the mayor.
Okay. So this interview is going to air on May 8th, Wednesday. We're recording this on Tuesday. By the time this interview airs, we will most likely know how the encampment clearing in Kensington went. What are your thoughts on that particular issue, the clearing, and then just the general plans for Kensington as we know them now?
I believe that, you know, we need to make sure we have a clear plan around what's happening in Kensington. In terms of clearing the encampment, I would hope that the city has a clear plan on what we're going to do around not just drug use, but homelessness and the poverty that we see in Kensington. And I hope we have a long-term plan to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all people in Kensington, the folks that are being removed in the encampment, as well as the families that have been affected by what we have allowed to happen over several years. You had a part two to that. I don't remember what it was.
Just the general plan for Kensington as we understand it now.
Do you understand? I don't quite understand it now, so I can't even. I'm sorry. Oh God, you just made me laugh about that. I'm still trying to understand the plan for Kensington, so I don't know. Kind of my same point. I hope that there's a clear plan as to exactly what's going to happen to all the folks in Kensington, the ones that are being moved in the encampment, as well as, you know, the betterment of the folks that live there.
All right. I'd like to bring in Denise Clay Murray here on Philadelphia Hall Monitor.
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry. I'm trying to multitask here and it's not working well. I guess my first question for you is, Councilmember Brooks, is, I guess, is there anything that you saw during your trip that you think we can do immediately as a city?
I mean, I think when we think about reforming the land bank is probably the number one thing. Like, how can city-owned land be better disposed to developers with a focus on affordable housing for all? You know, one of the things we see is like a lot of housing that says affordable, but the AMI is above that of average Philadelphians. And I think that's how we need to look into what we do with city-owned land moving forward.
I'm trying to do 3 different things at once. Okay, I you know, so when it comes to affordable housing, I mean, usually when we talk about affordable housing in this country, and we also talk about, you know, reinvestment versus disinvestment, we kind of look at what's going on overseas, and we think, oh well, we're not going to do that because that's socialist or whatever. But I guess how would you suggest we change minds about that here? Because from what you're telling us, you know, it really works, and especially if you could get companies to supply housing for their workers.
I mean, like this argument about socialism or making it a bad word, in reality, we are taking care of our folks. We need to make sure that the investments we make are sound. So basically, what we currently do is support people when they hit hard times. What we should be doing is offering support to stabilize communities so we all can thrive. So the money that we spend into homelessness, if we invested into housing to stabilize folks, our money would go much further. You know, when a person doesn't have stable housing, it affects their mental health, their ability to raise their children, the children's ability to learn in school and to maintain quality work. So we need to identify, you know, what are we calling socialism? Because we have a society that's funding poverty instead of funding a system that could prevent poverty.
Denise, we're getting some
Oh,
background
I'm
noise
sorry.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm at a press conference for the Sixers. The NAACP has come out in support of the Sixers in 76th place. So I'm trying to do two different things at once.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just after the questions, maybe just mute that, you know.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Well, actually, I did have one more question. I was watching yesterday's council hearings regarding the encampment in Kensington and how it's being cleared out or not cleared out, depending on who you talk to. And you asked some very specific questions of the administration in terms of what they intended to do there. And Larry even alluded to that a little bit in some of his questioning. Is there like an attitude in council where there's a little, because there seemed to be some frustration to me.
I think to Larry, what Larry asked me earlier, like we don't know the plan. We know that this what are they calling it? Encampment resolution is happening tomorrow. We're not really sure of all the sites and locations where people will be moved to. You know, people were, I think Councilmember O'Rourke asked press questions about prisons, and they said people were not being arrested. So, like, we don't have a clear plan. So, as the boots on the ground forward representative for the city, it puts us in an awkward position when folks are asking us what's happening tomorrow at the encampment resolution, and we don't have clear answers, or where people are going. We don't have clear answers. We don't even know what sites they're going to, you know, which is problematic. And that's the tension, I think, that people are seeing, that we're trying to get clear answers and we keep getting roadblocks.
Is anyone from your office or anyone from council monitoring that situation? Because we just got a notice from the Office of Communications, the mayor's office, that the press itself is not allowed to be where the encampment is tomorrow. So is there anybody from council or from your office monitoring the situation to see what's going on?
I think my legal team is looking into it now to figure out exactly, you know, what that looks like for tomorrow and who can be on board to kind of monitor or see what's happening. So we're waiting for some answers now.
Okay. Well, thank you, council member. And I'm going to give you back to Larry McGlynn and my co-host, and you are listening to Philadelphia Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5.
All right. Thank you, Denise. And Minority Leader Brooks, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. You have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
All right. We would like to thank Minority Leader Kendra Brooks for joining us on the program. And we're having some technical difficulties today. Lance Haver is not with us at the moment. We hope he'll be on with us soon because he has some important work to discuss. But right now, I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about the last thing we discussed with Councilmember Kendra Brooks in that interview. Last week, we had that interview ready to go. We ran a little long because we were talking about the Kensington encampment situation. And our reporting has that Vanessa Maria Graber did for us, explaining the situation on the ground there, that it didn't seem like aid workers were there, legal observers were not allowed in, and the press was not allowed in. And then you have the city telling you, well, we did all these wonderful things. Well, there's nobody there to see that. And I have a very hard time taking the word of people who tell you, well, you can't be there to watch it. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And now other outlets are reporting similar things that we reported last week, that, you know, this may not have gone as well as is being reported, that people didn't get the help they needed, and some people just happened to walk down other streets to avoid being in that particular encampment, and will go back eventually. We're also seeing more people at 30th Street Station and other places throughout the city who have left Kensington and who very well could go back soon. So the other problems here are, you know, not just the lack of transparency about the whole situation. We don't know much about what the plan is at this point. City Council has been quite vocal about that, and more so in recent weeks, recent days, really, because there have been other parts of the plan that have seemed to come to light that we're not clear on. And you know, certain things, like when City Council has a hearing with the managing director, where the managing director does not offer any more details, but there are details in a request for proposal that came out a few days before that hearing that nobody knew about, that had details that were not discussed at council. This does not engender trust. And I've been told on background from several sources in City Council that there's not a lot of trust for the mayor right now. And that is completely understandable, because we're dealing with a situation where it seems like we're just going to do things. The administration's just going to do things, and council is to accept these things. And I just don't think that's going to work. There was a contentious meeting last night about well, I don't even know if you want to call it a triage center or whatever you want to call it, the old Philadelphia nursing home at 2100 Girard Avenue, where the people in the community said, we didn't know anything about this. We had no idea that this was going to happen. The council member in that district did not know what was going on there. And that is one of those things that is one of the unwritten rules of City Council. You do not do anything in a council member's district without them knowing about it. And that's it's a little deeper than what we call councilmanic prerogative, the idea that city council members can basically sort of rule over their districts like a fiefdom. This is actually more of a common courtesy kind of thing, I think. Why not tell the council member what you're going to do? Why not have community feedback about this? The administration didn't want to do that. And I think the rationale for that, the reason for that, is because, you know, they knew people would not be in favor of this kind of work being done in their district at that facility. So this is what, you know, City Council and the mayor, it's an interesting time right now, because Councilmember Young put up legislation about, saying that nobody can do anything at that facility until a robust public meeting and consideration has been done. I think you're going to see more of this as we go on, because, you know, we're in a place where the administration seems to be going full speed ahead without telling anybody what the plans are or where the plans are even going to happen. We're still looking at these triage centers, the $100 million price tag for the triage centers, and that gets a little murky too, right? How many triage centers are there going to be? Well, nobody seems to know. What are they going to do? What's the philosophy behind them? Nobody really can explain that. Where are the locations going to be? We don't know. So, and the $100 million, by the way, only go for capital costs. That's not, that's just the buildings, building buildings, maintaining buildings, renovating buildings, refitting buildings. That's not going for the actual treatment. And I don't think anyone's really answered how that's going to work. So when you look at all this, uncertainty regarding triage centers, not a real plan that anybody can look at regarding Kensington. It, it makes you wonder, is there even a plan? Or is the plan something that people are going to dislike so much that they don't want it out there? Either way is bad. They're equally bad. Not having a plan is a bad situation. Having a plan that nobody wants is also bad, especially if you're not going to talk about it. And I think people would be more amenable to any kind of plan or any kind of action if they knew what it was. One of the things I harken back to is the debate over safe injection sites. People in Kensington roundly refuse this. They don't want that there. And I think if you live in Kensington, you can understand, if you're looking at it if you've lived in Kensington for 20 or 30 years, I can understand why you might say no. Like we've been fighting this for so long, why would we do this? That's a little bit understandable. However, if you laid it out there and said, listen, that's going to be just phase one of a multi-phase plan that's going to take place over 5 years, let's say. Safe injection sites, get people in there, have conversations with them about, treatment, housing, job training, all those kinds of things. And then, we're going to go from there. People might say, well, all right, we haven't tried that. It's a plan. And we have an end date on it. If it doesn't work, we know that in 10 years or 5 years, whatever it's going to be, that we are going to, maybe try something else if this doesn't work. So there are a lot of different options there for ways to get these plans together. And we really haven't seen that yet. We haven't seen the administration offer anything. And quite honestly, it's kind of strange, to tell you the truth. When you couple this with one of the other things we talked about with Councilmember Brooks, the end around that the mayor ran around city council regarding the appointment of Joyce Wilkerson to the school board, you can understand why council is having issues trusting the mayor right now, and why people who follow these things are surprised. And just speaking of that, by the way, we're looking at a situation where city council, the school board, had a meeting last week, and Joyce Wilkerson voted on things at that meeting. And, if somebody sues the school board and says, well, she's not really a member, she can't vote on things, that could invalidate everything they did. So this is that is still not resolved, in my opinion. So there are a lot of questions up in the air, and a lot of things that have already been done that seem to have been done very quickly, without any real, thought put behind them. Or maybe there was, and we're just not privy to that, because it's a very, very interesting situation that we're dealing with right now. It's a challenging situation, and I'm not sure anybody outside of the mayor's office knows how to handle this, knows what to do about it, and knows what's coming next. What is coming next, however, is one of these important issues that we talk about all the time on this show, the budget. And budget hearings have concluded. We don't think there will be any more callbacks, although I wouldn't be surprised if the managing directors were called back one more time, because there are still unanswered questions there. But, city council is going to have to vote on this budget. $6.3 billion. And, the budget itself is we use the term moral document constantly. And that's what it is. It's the lifeblood of all the mechanisms of the city, right? Without the money, none of these things work. And what we know about the budget, we've studied it, we know that the administration wants to spend less on housing, despite the fact that 30,000 housing units was one of the promises candidate Parker made on the campaign trail. We know that the money for the University City Townhome area, that to recreate some public housing in West Philadelphia, that funding may not be there now, which is a surprise. I don't know what the rationale is there for taking that money off the table. We have, the money for safe and needle exchanges off the table, and the administration itself had to say, yeah, HIV rates and other bloodborne illnesses, well, that they will be on the rise because of this. So, when you look at these things, when you look at all of these things in totality, it's a very odd situation, especially when there isn't any explanation behind it. Why are we doing this? What's the point of this? How are you going to handle the fallout of these issues that we all can see coming? So the budget has to be resolved by, well, technically by June 30th, and it has to be passed because the fiscal year begins July 1st. So now what you're looking at is a timeline from now until the last meeting of council. The last meeting of council, I believe, is slated for June 13th. So we got about a month. All right. The budget is probably still being negotiated as we speak, and probably will be right up until the time it has to pass. It has to go through two separate council meetings. So the committee of the whole has to put the budget out. At the next session of council, it's heard, and then it goes for another week. It has to be heard, and that sometimes has been the last day of council, where the budget is passed. PICA approves it, and it's set in the motion for the following year. I don't know if there's going to be any fallout on the council side because of what's been happening regarding the triage centers, the school board, all those things. These are unusual circumstances that council cannot be happy about. And I know they're not happy about it. Like I said, they've told me on background. Members of officials in council have told me we're not happy about this. It's very hard to trust the mayor at this point. And that's understandable. And I think the mayor has some work there to do. And I think there's the possibility it affects the budget negotiations. I don't see how it can't. If you are one of the members who, let's say, was against Joyce Wilkerson, and you're in those conversations, the first question has to be, what was that? Why did you do that? And if you're looking at the triage center funding, which they all are, well, why are we going to give you money, $100 million? Why are we going to give you $100 million for something that we don't know where you're going to put it? You're probably going to put it in my district, which I don't want. That might be what a council member is thinking right now. We don't know what any of this is going to be. So why would we sign on to any of this? And I think those are the discussions that are happening internally and are most likely happening in that negotiation table. It's one of those things where if you're a council member, you should be concerned, not just for this budget, but for what's going to come next. Remember, council won't be in session for the month of July, the month of August. They come back in September. So it's almost 3 months, really, by the time they're out and come back. That's a lot of time for the mayor to do things without council having regular meetings. I would suspect that there will be things that happen over the summer that council may not be thrilled about, because that's just been the pattern so far. And we're going to see interesting things develop between now and the time we come back in the fall, because we're going to have that budget and we're going to have the whole summer. And then when we come back in the fall, we're going to have, regular council meetings and whatever happened in the fall. And then budget's still not really over. Budget's never over. You'll have the mid-year transfer ordinance, which will happen probably in October, which is moving some money around, different money to different departments. we could have another fight there where we say, okay, well, we didn't fund this last time. Let's fund it now. Well, maybe we don't fund it. Maybe we consider doing something else. So there's a lot of question marks right now, I think, about where the city is, what they're going to be doing, and there isn't a lot of transparency about this. We don't know what the plans are. Council doesn't seem to know what the plans are, and we are going to have to wait and see. And that doesn't feel good when you're talking about major initiatives throughout the city. That's not even talking about the Sixers arena, which is still one of the major issues that we have on the back burner. And general issues like crime and poverty and all those sorts of things. So there's a lot coming up, a lot to deal with, a lot going on. And that's what we're here for. We're here to help you navigate this, and we're going to keep looking into it and keep digging into it and keep trying to find out what these answers are. So Lance isn't able to get on tonight. He's having technical issues. He wants us to know that the hearing for SEPTA's operation hearing is this coming Monday at 10 a.m. at 1234 Market Street. So SEPTA's operational hearing is this Monday at 10 a.m. at 1234 Market Street. All right. And that is crucial because as we've been following the SEPTA bus revolution, we need to know more about what's happening there as well. Lance reported last week that we know that some of the routes are being readjusted, that they're it's a better situation than it was, but we don't know the whole result yet. And this is another thing where transparency would be helpful. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who rely on SEPTA every day, and they don't know if their bus route's going to be there and what's going to replace it. So these are serious questions. We're also, next week, we'll talk about the water rates. We'll put that back till next week because, again, 14% rate increase. This is the kind of stuff that really affects people. And, for some people, that extra $20 a month, that's a big deal. That's a really big deal. And it's the kind of thing where it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of accountability there. And if you haven't read Lance's piece in the Hall Monitor newsletter that came out yesterday, I recommend you do, because he lays it all out. Why this seems to be the way it is, who the players are, and why they might be carrying things out the way that they are. It feels like the politics as usual. When people complain about politics as usual, that's what these water rate hikes feel like. Politics as usual. People in a room deciding what's best for other people. Not even deciding what's best, just deciding what other people are going to have to do. And when you start increasing the rates, the water rates, what people have to pay for water, that's going to affect the people who can least afford to do it. And it happens unilaterally. And it's other than housing, water is one of those it's like the number one thing you need. And, we're going to be looking at people having to pay more for this, which is going to create even more problems for a city where the poverty rate, we keep hearing about the poverty rate going down. And I suspect it will go back up because, we're talking, when we lose things like the child tax credit, we didn't lose it, but the money that, the amount has come down. We're going to see those rates go back up, and it's going to be a big issue. So next week on the program, we will be joined by Lance Haver, who will tell us more about what's going on with the water department. Chris Murray will be back to talk about his book, and we will see you next week on Hall Monitor.